Black, bliggity black, 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 he black, she black, they black. Ain't nobody ever seen a black human. Black man, black woman, black love, black community, black American, black culture, black business. Even though your skin brown, you black. You ain't ever seen a white human. You ain't ever seen a person the same color as copy paper or snow. You might come close. Even though your skin pink or light gray or orangish, you white. Even though you got 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third great-grandparents, 64 fourth great-grandparents, 128 fifth great-grandparents, 256 sixth great-grandparents, you black, you African. In the 1850 U.S. Census, my relative was black. In the 1860 U.S. Census, the same relative was mulatto. In the 1870 U.S. Census, he was Negro. You ain't American. You black. And then you were gotten from Puerto Rico and Cuban, Chilean, Honduran, Mexican, and you a Latino, a Latina, Afro-Latin. Afro-Latin? Hispanic? I remember in elementary school, the teacher would give us a list of vocabulary words. We'd have to find the definition of these words, learn the definitions, and we were then quizzed on the meanings of these vocabulary words at the end of the week. Black. Description, etymology, and facts. Britannica. Black. Black in physics. What is perceived with the human eye when light is absent or when all wavelengths in the visible spectrum are absorbed, like white. Black lacks hue. Like white, black lacks hue. The word black derives from Proto-Germanic blackas, 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 blackass, and Old English Blake. One of the first written records of the term is from an Old English translation, circa 890 CE, of Saint Bede the Venerable's Historia Ecclesiastica. He have the black foe. He had black hair. Before the invention of color photography, Werner's nomenclature of color, 1814, was frequently used by scientists attempting to accurately describe colors observed in nature. In that book, the so-called tint, raven black, is compared to the berry of deadly nightshade and olivine ore. In the Munsell color system, adopted in the early 20th century to standardize color, usually for industry, absolute black has a value of 0. The Oxford Learners Dictionary.com. Black, adjective. People, black, belonging to a group of people who have dark skin, especially people who come from or whose ancestors came from Africa, connected with black people. Black is the word most widely used and generally accepted in Britain. In the U.S., currently accepted terms are African American or Black American. However, the term persons of color is now often the preferred way of talking in general about people who are not white. Do not confuse this term with colored person, which is now considered offensive. So, person of color is now the often preferred way of talking in general about people who are not white, but don't confuse it with colored person, which is now considered offensive. I know. This sounds ridiculous. Very dirty, covered with dirt, chimneys black with smoke, full of anger or hate, without hope, very depressing, literally evil or immoral, dealing with unpleasant or terrible things such as murder in a humorous way. Dealing with unpleasant or terrible things such as murder in a humorous way. I looked at a portion of the news and they were talking about these shorties who were downtown in this city. And these shorties came across another group of shorties and they started popping at one another. Two shorties got killed. The group of shorties were seen on the CCTV cameras going to the L platform, and they were celebrating. They were dealing with this unpleasant or terrible thing in a humorous way. This is the American Dictionary of the English Language by Noah Webster, 1828, the online version. Black, black adjective, of the color of night, destitute of light, dark, darkened by clouds, as the heavens black with clouds, sullen, having a cloudy look or countenance, atrociously wicked, horrible, as a black deed or crime, dismal, mournful, calamitous, black and blue, the dark color of a bruise in the flesh, which is accompanied with a mixture of blue. Black, noun, that which is destitute of light or whiteness, the darkest color, or rather a destitution of all color, as a cloth has a good black. A Negro, a person whose skin is black. This is the American Dictionary of the English Language, Noah Webster, 1828. This is the physical copy that I own and scanned. Black, adjective, Saxon, black and black, black, pale, wan, livid, blation, blaken, to become pale, to turn white, to become black, to blacken, blake, ink, blake, pale, wan, livid, blake, ink, blaker, to insulate, to expose to the sun, or to bleach, also to lighten, to flash, bleak, pale, bleaken, to bleach, bleak, pale, wan, bleak, bleachin, to bleach, blake, ink, bleak, pale, wan, bleak, sallow, bleager, to bleach. It is remarkable that the black, bleak, and bleach are all radically one word. It is remarkable that black, bleak, and bleach are all radically one word. The primary sense seems to be pale, wan, or sallow, from which has proceeded the present variety of significations. Of the color of night, destitute of light, dark. Wait a minute. So, number one, of the color of night, destitute of light, dark. Now, when we go back to the Noah Webster American Dictionary of the English Language, this online version starts with of the color of night, destitute of light, dark. But when we go to the physical copy that I scanned, it's the entire first section has been omitted in the online version. Which makes me question the online version of all the definitions and etymology of words. Consider this as we move on. Captain John Smith, The General History of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles, 1624. Then Powhatan, Indian chief. Then Powhatan, Pocahontas said, this is said to be Pocahontas' father. Then Powhatan, more like a devil than a man, with some 200 more as black as himself, came unto him, and told him now that they were friends, and presently he should go to Jamestown to send him 2 great guns and a grindstone, for which he would give him the county of Cappahawasick, and forever esteem him as his son Nanticoke. Online etymology dictionary. Keep in mind what we've learned about the online version of definitions in etymology. Black, adjective. Old English Blake, absolutely dark, absorbing all light, of the color of soot or coal, from Proto-Germanic blackes, burned, source also of Norse blacker, dark. Old High German blah, black, Swedish black, ink, Dutch blacken to burn, from pi, bleg, to burn, gleam, shine, flash. Source also of Greek phlegon, to burn, scorch, Latin flagrare, to blaze, glow, burn, from root, bale, to shine, flash, burn. The usual Old English word for black was swert, see swart. Bale, to shine, a shine, you shines. The same root produced Middle English black, pale, from Old English black, bright, shining, glittering, pale. The connecting notions being perhaps fire, bright and burned, dark, or perhaps absence of color. According to OED in Middle English, it is often doubtful whether black, Blake means black, dark, or pale, colorless, wan, livid. And the surname Blake can mean either one of pale complexion or one of dark complexion. Black was used of dark-skinned people in Old English, of coffee with nothing added, attested by 1796. The meaning fierce, terrible, wicked is from the late 14th century. The figurative senses often come from the notion of without light, moral or spiritual. Latin Niger or Latin nigger, Latin Niger, had many of the same figurative senses: gloomy, unlucky, bad, wicked, malicious. Black, verb, from black, adjective, especially clean and polish, boots, shoes, etc. By blacking and brushing them, 1550s. Related, blacked, blacking, black, noun. It is attested from the late 14th century as dark spot in the pupil of the eye. The meaning dark-skinned person, African, is from the 1620s, perhaps late 13th century, and blackamoor is from 1540s. Coal black, adjective, black as coal, mid 13th century, from coal, noun, plus black, adjective. Samuel Johnson's Dictionary, 1755, online version, keep that in mind. Black, adjective, black Saxon, of the color of night, cloudy of countenance, sullen, horrible, wicked, atrocious, dismal, mournful. National Endowment for the Humanities, College of Arts and Humanities. Also from the Samuel Johnson's Dictionary online version, 1755, Negro, Spanish negri, negra, a blackamoor, a blackmoor. Negroes transplanted into cold and phlegmatic habitations continue their hue in themselves and their generations. Brown. This is from Jack D. Forbes' book, Africans and Native Americans, page 67. We will proceed to illustrate how terms meaning black have been utilized for peoples whose skin colors are often of various lighter shades. According to Simonet, in his study of the language spoken by the Mizrabes, Christian Spaniards under Muslim rule before 1492, Moro meant Negro and corresponded to Castilian, usage in which Moro was applied to horses whose color was negro, derived from Latin moros, negro. These forms stemmed from Latin morus, also from Greek, for the dark color of the Mauritanos, Moros, peoples of Northwest Africa. In 1591, an Italian went to Cabo Verde a comprar mori per India occidentally, that is, to buy African slaves for the Americas. The people of northwestern Africa, Algeria, Morocco, were anciently known as Maori or Mauritanians, and this name in both Greek The people of northwestern Africa, Algeria, Morocco were anciently known as Maori or Mauritanians. But in 1524, the Carolina Coast people were said to be of dark color, not much unlike the Ethiopians with lighter colored people farther north. From 1549 through 1565, the letters of Jesuit missionaries in Brazil usually addressed to colleagues in Portugal or Spain, frequently refer to the Americans as Negroes. Thus, the Jesuit father called the American women living with Portuguese men negras, a term which, according to Late, could not have denoted people from Africa, because in 1549 there were few or no African women in Bahia. When Africans are referred to in the Jesuit letters, they are always called Negros de Guinea, blacks from Guinea, to distinguish them from the Negros de Terra, blacks of the land or Americans. In June 1551, Brother Diego Jacome wrote from São Vicente to the Jesuits of Coimbra, Portugal, referring to Americans as negros. A very interesting letter is one prepared by dos meninos do Colegio da Bahia, that is, by the young Americans studying in the school Topinamba, Peribriba, Mongueta, and Quantia, also probably edited by Jesuit. This may represent the first letter written by Americans in European language from Brazil. In it, they refer to an American leader, El Grillo, as a negro, and to other natives as negros. We find, for example, El Grillo, who is a negro very well known and feared among them, and that El Grillo as negro, El Grillo was at the same time an Indi pagan and a friend of the Portuguese. In August 1552, Nobrega wrote from Bahia to Lisbon, referring to the native people as negro. In May 1554, Antonio Blasquez from Porto Seguro wrote to the Jesuits of Coimbra that he was preaching to the Americans. He was preaching to the Americans, called negros. The editor notes that by negros, negras, he meant indios y indias. In 1556 or 1557, Nobrega prepared one of the first works of literature written by a European in the Americas. In it, Nobrega frequently used negro for indio. A month later, Antonio Blasquez wrote from Bahia to Father Ignatius Loyola in Rome to the effect that an American with his negra wished to be baptized. Nobrega also wrote in a letter to the governor that 8 Negros of Guinea were killed by a party of 60 valiant Negros by using Negros of Guinea for Africans and Negros for Native Americans. Nobrega is able to refer to both in the same sentence. Thus, negro is used for Indian, not for someone from Africa. Father Joseph de Anchieta, another prominent Jesuit in Brazil, between 1570 and 1584, carefully refers to Africans as negros de Guinea, while calling Americans indios da terra. In 1587, a secular author, Gabriel Soares de Sousa, mentions Africans as negros de Guinea and pretos da Guinea, while Americans are usually called indios da terra. On the other hand, Soares refers to an American woman as being muito preta, very black, as contrasted with her son, who was very white and albino. The father was not very preto. A modern Portuguese dictionary says of negra, woman of black color, a slave, a woman who works a lot. Woman of black color, a slave, a woman who works a lot. Negro is similar. One who is of dark color, black, somber, darkish, blackish, vile, odious, indignant, adverse, a man of the Negro race, a man who works a lot, a slave. Translates Portuguese negro as English nigger. The Portuguese habit of referring to Indians, Sinhalese, and even to Chinese and Japanese as niggers was fairly widespread and lasted longer than is usually realized. We may note again the many Jesuit letters to Rome using negro for Americans. Unfortunately, many English-speaking authors tend to translate negro as black rather than as nigger or slave, and have failed to see the implications for Brazilian history of the above distinctions. Many of the slaves from Terra Nova, Newfoundland, were called Negroes. Newfoundland. In spite of being half white and probably half American, he was termed a black man. The general use of the term Negro in Spain can also be seen in the instance in 1607 when the Annals of Seville record that the new unassimilated Negroes who introduced smoking tobacco to Seville must have been Americans. In the island of Puerto Rico, there are above 15,000 Negroes and less than 500 Spaniards. And in all of the island of Hispaniola, there may be 2,000 Spaniards and there are over 30,000 Negroes. The same is the case in the island of Cuba and in Veracruz, Puerto de Caballos, which is in Honduras, and the Nombre de Dios, Cartagena, Santa Maria, and the coast of Venezuela, where there are 20 Negroes to one white man. Over the years, Negro and Black both became synonymous with enslavement. In 1702, an observer wrote that the wealth of Virginia consisted in slaves or Negroes. In 1819, South Carolina judges stated flatly the word Negroes has a fixed meaning, slaves. Most unmixed American Indians, if living in Britain today, would be regarded as being black. Most unmixed American Indians, if living in Britain today, would be regarded as being black. In 1688, the London Gazette carried an advertisement for a black boy, an Indian, about 13 years old, runaway, the 8th Institute from Putney, with a collar about his neck with the inscription, "The Lady Bromfield's Black." In 1709, the Tatler carried an advertisement for a black Indian boy, 12 years of age. Similar usage of language is also found in the play Mangora, written by Thomas More in 1718. In a scene taking place in Paraguay, an American warrior chant to an American woman, "Black beauty comes on. Black beauty come on. I must love thee or none. You see my face black." Illustrate the use of Negro and Black in English as applied to people of American ancestry. 1764, William Young, living on St. Vincent were about 3,000 black Caribs or free Negroes. The latter were eventually defeated and some 5,000 were shipped to an island near the coast of Honduras. In 1723, Virginia adopted a law depriving free Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians of certain basic rights. Quite clearly, persons having American ancestry or the appearance of it could be called Negroes in Virginia. Since many, but not all, Native Americans were brown or dark colored without African ancestry, many of their descendants, when mixed only with African blood, would very likely be seen as Negroes by most Europeans, especially in North America, where special terms for such persons such as Zambo, Grifa, Lobo, Cabra, and Cabori. In 1890, black was to be used for all persons having 3/4 or more black blood. In visual perception, color is almost never seen as it really is. as it physically is. In order to use color effectively, it is necessary to recognize that color deceives continually. Please forgive me. Deal with color in a very imprecise and often symbolical manner. White is, of course, a good example since probably few, if any, human beings are white. In recent centuries, white people have coined the expression colored people to refer to non-whites, thus stating indirectly at least that whites are indeed uncolored or blank people. English blank simply means white. But the fact remains that people called white are perhaps never white. They may be pinkish, light grayish, creamy, very light brown, ruddy reddish, and so on, but not truly white. Thus, white as applied to humans is usually symbolic or non-specific. Black can also be seen as a symbolic or non-specific color, since few, if any, humans are actually black. The Etymology, Origin, and Meaning of Africa by Etym Online. Africa, noun, Latin, Africa, terra, African land, Libya, the Carthaginian territory, the province of Africa, Africa as a continent, of adjective Africus, from Afar, an African, a word of uncertain origin. The Latin word originally was used only in reference to the region around modern Tunisia. It gradually was extended to the whole continent. Derivation from a Phoenician cognate of Arabic afar, dust, earth, is tempting. The Middle English word was Afrique. Afrique, adjective, African, 1580s, from Latin Africus. African, noun, Old English, Africanus, plural, native or inhabitant of Africa, from Latin Africanus, adjective, of Africa, African, from Africa. Used of white residents of Africa from 815, from Africa. Used of white residents of Africa from 1815. Used of black residents of the U.S. from 18th century, when it especially meant one brought from Africa and sometimes was contrasted to native-born Negro. As an adjective by 1560s pertaining to Africa or Africans, Old English had Africanist. from 1722 as of or pertaining to Black Americans. Idea of Africa. Origins of the name Africa, African, North, Continent, and called. J rank articles. Idea of Africa. Origins of the name Africa. At least 7 origins have been suggested. 1. It is a Roman name for what the Greeks call Libya, itself perhaps a Latinization of the word, perhaps a Latinization of the name of the Berber tribe, Auriga, perhaps pronounced Africa. Second, it is derived from 2 Phoenician terms, either referring to corn or fruit, Pharica, meaning land of corn or fruit. Third, it comes from Phoenician root faraka, meaning separation or diaspora. A similar root is apparently found in some African languages such as Bambara. Fourth, it is drawn from the Latin adjective aprica, sunny, or the Greek aprik, free from cold. 5, it might even stem from Sanskrit and Hindi, in which the root apara or Africa denotes that which in geographical terms comes after, to the west, in which case Africa is the western continent. 6, it is the name of the Yemenite chief named Africus, who invaded North Africa in the 2nd millennium BCE and founded a town called Africa. Or 7, it springs from Aphor, who was a grandson of Abraham and a companion of Hercules. There is little agreement on the sources and original meaning of the word Africa. It appears the term Africa was used widely from Roman times to refer initially to North Africa, originally called by the Greek or Egyptian word Libya, before it was extended to the whole continent from the end of the 1st century of the Common Era. Africa was a European construct, as much as Europe itself was a construct inflicted by the idea of Africa and Asia, whose cartographic application was both gradual and contradictory in that as the name embraced the rest of the continent, it increasingly came to be divorced from its original North African coding and became increasingly conformed to the regions referred to in Eurocentric and sometimes Afrocentric conceptual mapping as Sub-Saharan Africa, seen as the pristine locus of the real Africa, or what the German philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel called Africa proper. The adoption of Black as the preferred name of African Americans from the 1960s in place of Negro simply reinforced the relabeling of Africa as Black, a tag that simultaneously rejected and reinscribed the old pejorative appellation of the Dark Continent. For the French, Afrique Noire served to distinguish the West and Central African colonies from the fictive overseas provinces of metropolitan France in North Africa, especially Algeria. Metropolitan France in North Africa, especially Algeria. Afro, Etymology Dictionary, online version. Afro, full, bushy hairstyle worn by some people of African ancestry, 1938. African American, adjective. The modern use is a reinvention first attested 1969 in reference to the African American Teachers Association, which became the preferred term in some circles for U.S. black, noun or adjective, by the late 1980s. Afro-American is attested in 1853 in Freeman's Publications in Canada. Afro-American 1817 as a noun, 1826 as an adjective, was common in abolitionist and colonization society writings. Let's move on to The Origin of African American Arts and Culture, Yale Alumni Magazine. The origin of African American. The term's earliest known appearance in print is in an 18th century sermon. This is by Fred Shapiro, 2016. Most of us became familiar with the ethnonym African American in the 1980s when Jesse Jackson began popularizing it as an alternative to black. An ethnonym is a name by which an ethnic or racial group is known. The term is much older than that, dating back to the earliest days of the American Republic. The Oxford English Dictionary traced its documented occurrences of African American back as far as 1835. The related term Afro-American, which enjoyed a brief popularity in the 1960s, has an 1831 citation in the OED. A routine search for the phrase in America's historical newspapers, the Redex Company's very powerful database of early U.S. papers, and was surprised to be led to a 1782 sermon published in Philadelphia. The sermon, whose only known surviving copy is at Harvard's Houghton Library, was titled A Sermon on the Capture of Lord Cornwallis. The title page of the pamphlet includes the byline, by an African American. The sermon gives few clues about the identity of the preacher. It was written by someone who was black, had some ties to South Carolina. Beyond that, I had no clue as to his background or what kind of person he was. Richard Newman, a scholar of African American history and now director of the Library Company of Philadelphia, says he is not sure that the author was a person of color despite the byline. I've been under the impression that most of this black loyalist group left with the British, says Rugemer. This sermon suggests that many in fact stayed, and the writer is arguing that they move on and embrace the American experiment. On this point, Newman agrees. If it was written by an African American, he says, the pamphlet may indeed have been strategically aimed at integrating blacks into the new social and political order. We are back at Samuel Johnson's dictionary, 1755, the online version, National Endowment for the Humanities, College of Arts and Humanities. Keep in mind, this is the online version. Mulatto, Spanish, mulat, French, from mulas, Latin, one begot between a white and a black, as a mule between different species of animals. Etymology, Origin, and Meaning of Mulatto by Etym Online. Etymology Dictionary Online, the online version. Mulatto, noun, 1590s. One who is the offspring of a European and a black African. From Spanish or Portuguese, mulatto, of mixed breeds, literally young mule, from mulo, mule, from Latin mulus, feminine, mula, mule, possibly in reference to hybrid origin of mules. Compare Greek hemions, a mule, literally a half as an adjective, one of mixed race. Mule, hybrid offspring of donkey and horse, from Old English mule, mule. Old French mule, mule, hiney, both from Latin mulus. The Etymology Dictionary online version. Latino, Latino, male Latin American inhabitant of the United States. Feminine, Latina. 1946, American English, from American Spanish, a shortening of Latino Americano, Latin American. Cholo, Indian or mixed race person of Latin America. Feminine, chola, 1851, from American Spanish, circa 1600, said to be from Nahuatl, Aztecan, Zoloto, dog, mutt, proposed derivation from Mexican city of Cholula. Seems too late if this is the same word. In U.S. used of lower class Mexican immigrants, but by 1970s the word began to be embraced in Latino gang slang in a positive sense. Latin, noun, the language of the ancient Romans. Old English Latin, Latin, the language of the Romans. The more common form in Old English was laden, from vulgar Latin, ladenum, which probably was deformed by influence of Old English loden, leaden, language. In Old French, the word was used very broadly. Speech, language, what Latin was to the learned, that their tongue was to laymen. Hence, Latino was used for any dialect, even Arabic and the language of birds. Duncan, Etymological Dictionary of the Romance Languages, 1864. Old Latin is the Latin before the classical period, including early authors and inscriptions. Classical Latin flourished from about 75 BCE to about 200 CE. The Latin of Lucretius, Catullus, Caesar, Cicero, Virgil, Horace, Ovid, Livy, Seneca, etc. It is the standard Latin of the grammars and dictionaries. The New Yorker. The scholar who chronicled the Afro-Latino experience by Stefania Taladrid, March 20th, 2021. This is from the New Yorker.com. Black, bliggity, black, 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 he black, she black, you black, they black. As a black Puerto Rican growing up in Harlem in the 1960s, she began to think of blackness in terms of a diaspora encompassing but not limited to the African American, Dominican, and New Yorican cultures that surrounded her. Inspired by the values and ideas that sprung from the civil rights and black liberation movements, Jimenez Roman understood her identity to be as much a question of skin color as a condition within an economic, social, and political hierarchy. Jimenez Roman felt her identity being pulled in three different directions: Latina, African, and American. Afro-Latinos. Miriam had an unwavering commitment to bringing Afro-Latinos to the fore. Yamila Sterling Baker, a close friend of hers, says, after graduating from Binghamton, Jimenez Roman returned to New York and was drawn to Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Arturo Alfonso Schomburg turned his focus to Pan-Africanism, amassed a collection of historical documents and books detailing the prowess of black writers, composers, and painters all over the world. In a famed address from 1913, he denounced a notable omission in the telling of history. Whenever the Negro is mentioned in the textbook, it dwindles down to a footnote, he said. Where is our historian to give us our side view? During her time at the Schomburg Center, Jimenez Roman taught her first course on the African presence in the Americas. Flores was looking into the African roots of Puerto Rican identity. African roots of Puerto Rican identity? And he too believed in the need to erase the divide between Black and Latino studies. Flores and Jimenez Roman kept coming back to the same question. What about the people who identify as both Black and Latino? Blackness, Latinidad. There was virtually no awareness that the arrival of Afro-Latinos in the United States had predated both the first English settlements and the nation's founding. Black Latinos, Afro-Latino, Latinidad, Black Latinos. Ahead of the 2000 census, Latinos were cast as the nation's largest minority. Analysts described them as on a collision course with African Americans and started theorizing about their unspoken conflict. Unspoken conflict. Afro-Latinos. When the idea of a book on Afro-Latinidad arose, Jimenez Roman told Flores she wanted it to be the volume that had been missing when her younger self was looking for answers. Some writers focused on history, others on music, identity, class, and theology. The Afro-Latin at Reader, which Jimenez Roman edited alongside Flores, was published in 2010 by Duke University Press. The nearly 600-page book tells the story of a triple consciousness, a term inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois. the souls of black folk, or as uh, I'm just here to make you think, say W.E.B. Du Bois. We have always been here, Jimenez Roman observed years later. The book shines a light on pivotal moments of communion, such as Schomburg's role in the Harlem Renaissance, the creation in the 1960s of the Young Lords Party, which belonged to the Black Panthers Rainbow Coalition, and the birth of hip hop as a genre jointly derived from the Jamaican, Puerto Rican, and African American cultures. Black Afro Cuban, Black African American, Black American, Latin, Afro Latinos, Blacks. Identifying with and becoming part of the African American community turned out to be their most ready access to society in the United States. For years in Latin America, the myth of racial democracy inhibited necessary debates around race. The notion that the peoples of the Americas were mixed concealed a preference from whiteness and a worship of European ancestry. Because let them tell it, all Europeans are what we term white. Slash question mark. With the 2010 census approaching, Jimenez Roman worried that Afro Latinos would once again be undercounted, and she launched a campaign calling on the community to check both on the census form. One of the videos released by the forum features a group of black teenagers casually playing on the street. A boy peeks out from his window and is called on by the other kids to join them. Soon enough, his grandmother takes his place at the window and orders him back into the house. "You know I don't like it when you play with those black kids," the grandmother, performed by Jimenez Roman, says. "But grandma, those blacks are Latino," the grandchild responds indignantly. Images of people identifying as both Latino and black on the census follow. "We are Latinos and we are black. We are Latinos and we black," Jimenez Roman states, looking straight into the camera with a strong nod. Her work now focuses on disrupting the idea that Latinos don't know they're black. Back in the 1990s, when Jimenez Roman and Flores began holding workshops in schools, many children looked at them with befuddlement. I know, I can imagine. And asked if they had invented the term Afro-Latino. The share of U.S. Latinos who identify as black has since grown from 3% to more than a quarter. It is not just the population of Afro-Latinos in the country that is growing, but also people's readiness to identify as such. Miriam always identified with Puerto Rico. But did she identify as being from the Puerto Rican soil? All lives matter, yes. But if you don't talk about the lives that seem to receive the least attention, the lives that have no value, those who have been told they're basically worthless, until we give value to the worthless, nobody has any worth. Stefania Taladriz, a contributing writer at the New Yorker, teaches in the journalism program at Columbia University. The history behind the term Afro-Latino. The history behind the term Afro-Latina, people in Espanol. The history behind the term Afro-Latina. In this panel, three women who identify as Afro-Latinx discuss the origins of the term Afro-Latino. June 18th, 2018. Junio 18th, 2018. Black Latinos have had a hard time with their identity, not only with themselves, but the rest of society. Stereotypes surrounding Latinidad have largely erased the experiences of millions of Latinos who have African roots. Scholars like Professor Marta Morena Vega, the founder of the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute. Hold on, let's say that again. Scholars like Professor Marta Moreno Vega, the founder of the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute, have worked to change the narrative that Latinos can't be black. Since the beginning of the 15th century, you have African presence throughout the Americas, says Morena Vega. We have always been present as Afro-Latinos, African descendants. Morena Vega has been instrumental in coining the term Afro-Latino, which describes a Latin American person who has African ancestry. As we have these open conversations, people are beginning to understand their history, said Moreno Vega. This is why it's important to start acting upon the terminology. This is from National Geographic. History and Culture, Race in America, Hispanic, Latino. Here's where the terms come from. A person whose grandparents came from Spain, a person with indigenous Mexican heritage, and someone from a Portuguese-speaking Brazilian family, along with the roughly 19% of the U.S. population that might check Hispanic on their census form. By Aaron Blakemore. Blakemore, Black, Bleached, Bleak. Published February 10th, 2022. Choosing the term Hispanic or Latino as a source of identity is more complicated than just applying a label. A person whose grandparents came from Spain, a person with indigenous Mexican heritage, someone from Portuguese-speaking Brazilian family, could self-identify as both Hispanic or Latino or neither. Hispanic, Latino. The terms are both connected to controversy and confusion. Hispanic comes from the Latin term for Spanish, Hispanicus. The ancient Romans called the Iberian Peninsula Hispania. In the United States in the 19th century, the term Hispano was used to describe people descended from Spaniards who settled in the Southwest in the days before American annexation. But until the 20th century, Hispanic was mostly used to refer to things pertaining to ancient Spain. The colonization of Central and South America by Romance language-speaking European countries, including France, led to the 19th century term Latin America. The term Latino also came into being in the 19th century. Amid the growing racial consciousness of the 1960s, amid the growing racial consciousness of the 1960s, naturals, two groups, Mexican and Puerto Rican Americans, coined new terminologies for their nationalities. Two groups, Mexican and Puerto Rican Americans, coined new terminology for their nationalities. Two groups, Mexican and Puerto Rican Americans. Everyone in that group agreed to these new terms. Chicanos, a word that some scholars theorize likely morphed out of how the word Mexicano was pronounced, Mexicano, by some indigenous people, used the word to describe their pride in being Mexican American. Mexican, American, Mexico, America, Canada, North America, Mexico, Central America, South America. You can go from Canada to Argentina without crossing a body of water. So it's all America. Some Puerto Ricans proudly began calling themselves Boricuas. The indigenous name for the island is Borican or Borican. Where does the African... Let's continue. Attempted to expand their civil rights work, make policy changes, and obtain funding for their efforts in the 1960s and 70s. The hard-earned successes of Black activism. An important tool was hard population data on their communities, which they then used as leverage for funding and legislation. Mexican American activists, though, had difficulty adopting this strategy because the Bureau categorized persons of Mexican descent mainly as white, lumping them in with people of European descent, sociologist G. Cristina Mora writes. There were problems with Hispanic. Not only did the term conflate Spanish speakers with a single race or ethnicity, but it linked it to Spain, a European country some felt was more appropriately defined as European and which had colonized the Latin American countries with which it was now identified. European colonized Latin American countries. The term also left out those who did not speak Spanish but were from Latin America, including indigenous people and Portuguese speakers from Brazil. For some, Latino did away with the complexities of Hispanic, and its lack of colonial ties increased its appeal. The term made its first appearance in the 2000 decennial census. No one term can describe such a large group of people, says Nancy Lopez, a sociologist and director and co-founder of the University of New Mexico's Institute for the Study of Race and Social Justice. And though they are often used to refer to people with historic ties to Spanish colonization, pan-ethnic terms like Hispanic are used by others as shorthand for race, a social construct that has little to do with actual origin and everything to do with the person's appearance. a social construct that has little to do with your two parents, your four grandparents, your eight great grandparents, your 16 second great grandparents, and so on and so forth. Latino and Hispanic remain popular ways of referring to a large and diverse group. Roughly 62.1 million people, 19% of the population, identified as Hispanic on the 2020 census. According to a 2019 Pew Research survey, 47% of adults defined as Hispanic by census category use terms related to their family's country of origin, like Dominican or Mexican, to refer to themselves. Another 39% use the term Hispanic or Latino, and the remaining 14% prefer just plain American. For sure. William Byrd, 1674-1744, the Westover Manuscripts. The Westover Manuscripts. The History of the Dividing Line. A Journey to the Land of Eden, A.D. 1733. By William Byrd, 1841. The Indians are generally tall and well proportioned, which may make full amends for the darkness of their complexions. Add to this that they are healthy and strong, with constitutions untainted by lewdness and not enfeebled by luxury. Besides, morals and all considered, I cannot think the Indians were much greater heathens than the first adventurers who, had they been good Christians, would have had the charity to take this only method of converting the natives to Christianity. For, after all that can be said, a sprightly lover is the most prevailing missionary that can be sent amongst these or any other infidels. But about the year 1620, a large swarm of dissenters fled thither from the severities of their stepmother, the church. These saints, conceiving the same aversion to the copper complexion of the natives with that of the first adventurers to Virginia, would on no terms contract alliances with them, afraid perhaps, like the Jews of old, lest they might be drawn into idolatry by those strange women. In the morning we dispatched a runner to the Nottoway town to let the Indians know we intended them a visit that evening. Upon this occasion the ladies had arrayed themselves in all their finery. They were wrapped in their red and blue match coats, thrown so negligently about them that their mahogany skins appeared in several parts. Such charms might have had their full effect upon men who had been so long deprived of female conversation, but that the whole writers, but that the whole winter soil was so crusted on their skins. Once again, such charms might have had their full effect upon men who had been so long deprived of female conversation, but that the whole winter soil was so crusted on the skins of those dark angels, Americans. On the south side of Meherrin River, our course being for the most part northeast, all the grandees of the Saponi nation did us the honor to repair hither to meet us, and our worthy friend and fellow traveler, bare-skinned, appeared among the gravest of them in his robes of ceremony. 4 young ladies of the first quality came with him, who had more the air of cleanliness than any copper-colored beauties I had ever seen, beyond the common mean of savages, and indeed they ever had the reputation of being the honestest, as well as the bravest Indians we had ever been acquainted with. This people is now made up of the remnants of several other nations, of which the most considerable are the Saponis, the Okanichis, and the Staukenhocks. Etymology Online Dictionary, the online version. American, 1570s, originally one of the Aboriginal peoples discovered in the Western Hemisphere by Europeans. The original sense is now Native Americans. The sense of resident of North America of European, originally British descent is from 1765. American, adjective, 1590s, pertaining to the Western Hemisphere and its Aboriginal inhabitants. The sense of pertaining to the residents of North America of European, originally British descent is recorded by 1640s, later pertaining to the United States. The Library of Congress.gov Wise Guide. How did America get its name? The Library of Congress. How did America get its name? America is named after Amerigo Vespucci, the Italian explorer who set forth the then revolutionary concept that the lands that Christopher Columbus sailed to in 1492 were part of a separate continent. A map created in 1507 by Martin Waldseemüller was the first to depict this new continent with the name America, a Latinized version of Amerigo. He included on the map data gathered by Vespucci during his voyages of 1501 through 1502 to the New World. Waldseemüller named the new lands America on his 1507 map in the recognition of Vespucci's understanding that a new continent had been uncovered following Columbus's and subsequent voyages in the late 15th century. The map reflected a huge leap forward in knowledge, recognizing the newly found American landmass and forever changing mankind's understanding and perception of the world itself. The Library of Congress recently completed the purchase of the only known extant copy of this map for $10 million, thanks to the generosity of the U.S. Congress, Discovery Channel, Gerald Lindfest, David Koch, and several other donors. This extremely rare work contains the first suggestion that the area of Columbus's discovery be named America in honor of Amerigo Vespucci, who recognized that a new world, the so-called fourth part of the world, had been reached through Columbus's voyage. The earlier Spanish explorers referred to the area as the Indies, believing, as did Columbus, that it was a part of Eastern Asia. September 1911, 10 cents per copy. Watson's Jeffersonian Magazine. September 1911, the only magazine that stands for original democratic principles. The name of America, Alexander Del Mar. That the American continent derived its name from the Florentine merchant and geographer Amerigo Vespucci, and that thereby an injustice was done to Columbus is an impression which still retains a firm hold on the popular mind, yet many proofs have been offered that before Columbus landed, the name America was found scattered over the southern continent from the Caribbean Sea to the Pacific Ocean and from the Maracaibo Gulf and the Amaracapana coast near the Orinoco's outlet to the mountainous regions of Caxamarica around Bogota and over the heights of the Andes as far to the south as Peru. The proofs that the country bore a title much nearer to America than Amerigan may be summarized in the following citations. Amaracapana. This was a town of about 40 houses, and 400 Spaniards resided there constantly, who annually elected a captain. Chiefly in South America, 1790 to 1801 writes, the first settlement of the Spaniards on the mainland was at Amaracapana. Amataka Pana and Matakapana, called Maracaibo by the natives, which had 26 large houses of bell shape built on pillars or supports. This simple sentence is conclusive proof that at the time Vespucci made his first landing in the western continent, the port he stopped at was called Maracaibo, or America Land. Sir Walter Raleigh, the beautiful valley of Amerioka Pana, coast of America, and thence to the whole country between Maracaibo Bay and the Pacific was called Amarca, now known as Bogota, and stretching down to Peru was called Cax Amarca. Along the heights of the Andes in this region, the name again appears in the capital city, which was also called Cax Amarca, in one of the nearby towns called Pult Amarca, and Amarca and Catamarca, down near the mouth of the river Cumana was Amaracapana, coast of Amaracapana, Tamarac, a Spanish mode of spelling the same word. Also, the probability that had there been any intention to name the continent after Vespucci, his surname would have been used, so that the result would have been something like Vespugia instead of Ameriga. Europa originally designated a small village in Thessaly, but as it lay to the west of the Bosphorus and the Hellespont, it must have been spoken of the Asiatic neighbors in a manner to facilitate the more extended application. Asia indicated originally a very small part of what is now Asia Minor, but near the dividing line. Africa meant originally only that small part of the continent lying around Carthage, and with which the Romans came in contact. It was much less extended than Libya. Egypt was the name by which the Greeks knew a small seaport town near the mouth of the Nile, and bears no resemblance to the name, the Black Country, by which the ancient Egyptians designated their own land. The name China spread from a pretty mountain region on the border of India, because it was there that Europeans first came into any considerable contact with the empire. And it was by European nations that the name came to be obtruded on the nation which knew itself only as the Middle Kingdom. This shows that it is the spread of local names indigenous to a small region that large regions are named. Okay. Let's go. Discovery of the Origin of the Name of America by Thomas de Saint Brise, 1888. University of Toronto Library by the Ontario Legislative Library. The object of this abridged popular edition is to present in a brief, clear, and simple style our discovery of the origin of the name of America, which came as unexpectedly as that of Columbus. While we were collecting from the old works of the Spanish historians, the customs and the histories of the Americans, called Indians by mistake, in order to show their connection with Egypt, of which a preliminary sketch was published in 1882. And the Atlantic coast is taken from the first atlas where the name of America is applied to its southern division, to which we have added the information obtained from a local chart showing the coast of America and the kingdom of Cundin America, which the cities on the Pacific coast represent the extent of the kingdom of America at the period of its conquest by Spain. We use the word king in its general sense instead of the native name of Inca. The kings of America, or America, were the temporal and spiritual chiefs of their dominions. About this period, the art of printing was invented, 1440. But 15 years rolled by before the first book appeared. So far as is known, the Mazarin Bible, and gradually stories of Portuguese enterprise began to reach the seaports and learned centers of Europe, which brought many mariners and scholars to that country, where the jet black gentlemen imported as slaves from Africa, 1444, then living wonders, turned the eyes of Europe toward the little kingdoms for many years, and correspondences sent there by the principal people of several nations wrote home any information which might lead them toward the land of gold. Discovering the island of Cuba on the 28th of October, he named it Juana, after Prince John, the Spanish heir apparent. Some of the natives were smoking cigars, which they called tobacco, while others made them. Haiti, or what we call Haiti today, Haiti, they found on December 6th, and going ashore to dine, 5 chief subjects of King Gwa Kamahari came to visit him. He heard from the natives that the people were afraid of the Caribs, who went all over the islands and eat them, so that the Indian who accompanied the Spaniards ran forward crying, "Don't fear, the Christians are not Caribs, but came from heaven, and give many beautiful things to those who visit them. Their bread, made of roots resembling radishes, had the flavor of chestnuts." The Indians, the natives, the inhabitants, the indigenous people, mentioned Civao, which the admiral sailed for, expecting to reach Japan, but it was only another part of Haiti, and they called it Hispaniola, Little Spain. The admiral presented Indians gold, pearls, fish, and birds from the new islands to their majesties, who were much interested in hearing of the hospitable treatment of the natives, and amused by the story of the Indian lady who had seen her face for the first time in a mirror. The illustrious national sacred name of the greater portion of the southern continent, including that part first discovered by Columbus, was America, which appeared on early maps as an appropriate honor to the great navigator who had made the discovery. The Spanish colonists adopted the native name of America to designate their first settlement on the main island of the New World, but in those days the rules of orthography were undefined, and in addition to the numerous errors of printing, names were spelled in any way which the writer considered most appropriate, and hence we have America not only written America, Amerioco, and Amerioca, Maraca, Moraca, and America. But they added the native word pana, which Sir Walter Raleigh explains meant an equivalent of country. And in Codazzi's map, the name applying to the seashore is coast of Maracapana. From him, we learn that the first settlement of the Spaniards on the mainland was at Amaracapana, which, with Comana and Cubagua, both adjoining it, were the chief places of the African slave trade, so frightfully active there in the 16th century, until stopped by Emperor Charles V. The immense quantity of pearls, fish attracted the attention. The immense quantity of pearls first attracted the attention of Columbus and the Spanish pioneers who followed him, all of whom spoke of it as the Pearl Coast, which was on the low shore between the Capes Paria and de la Vela, appearing under the names of Coast of Maracapana, or properly Amaracapana and Pearl Coast, both covering equally the entire shore in Codazzi's map of Venezuela, showing the voyages of the admiral and others. An expedition arrived at the mainland 1499 following the admiral in command of Alonso de Ojeda, who had with him Amerigo Vespucci. Ojeda wrote a concise history of his voyage along the coast of Maracapana, or America. Caribs. We find from the foreign history that after searching the entire coast, the only place where they found a safe harbor, fresh water, good food, and hospitality was America. The gold and pearls sent by Columbus, which he had collected on the coast of Amaracapana. Nina and Guerra sailed for America a month after Ojeda, navigating as he did with a copy of the Admiral's map, and arrived on the coast of Amaracapana a few days after he had sailed. They sailed in 1502 and, reaching the Gulf of Paria, traded along the coast of Amaracapana. It is today in the province of Barcelona, formerly the port of Amaracapana, for which the pioneers sailed. and is no doubt the place referred to by Sir Walter Raleigh as the beautiful valley of Amarioka Pana, seizing whatever they wanted have, while Vergara sailed to Jamaica for provisions, with others with orders to join the fleet at Maracaibo. Columbus, who had been nearly 2 years in Spain, sailed on his fourth and last voyage, May 9th, 1502, I believe that is, with his brother and son to find the land of gold, and reaching the West Indies, steered for the hidden treasure toward Mexico, which stopped his passage as they only found a gulf. The natives told them of nations still further west abounding in gold and copper. An old Indian, who made a map of the coast, went with him, and landing at Honduras, they heard of a rich and populous country over the mountains, where the women wore pearls and corals, which they called Rich Coast, or Costa Rico. Costa Rico. And the people gave him the gold plates they wore in exchange for trinkets. As may be observed on our map, the gold mountains of Siamba appeared in Asia and also in America, and the nearest seaport to them is Moracapana, which was a transformation of the name of Amaracapana, or America, in order to give it some resemblance to Manji. The modern description of Amaracapana agrees identically with the history of it from the early colonists. Sir Walter Raleigh finds the valley of Amaracapana. As Sir Walter Raleigh is the only author who has, as far as we know, correctly given the native name of the coast of America first. At the age of 17, Mr. Riley left Oriel College, Oxford, 1569, to join some volunteers sent to assist the French Huguenots. After taking possession of Newfoundland for the crown, sending soon again, they discovered the coast, which he called after the Virgin Queen, Virginia, who knighted him. He then dispatched colonists, 1585, but they returned with Sir Francis Drake, introducing the first potato and tobacco leaf to Europe, and drinking smoke, as they called it, soon became fashionable. It was the staple product of Virginia. And the other by the people of Cax Amalca, America. He vanquished all that tract and valley of America, situated between the rivers Orinoco and Amazon, and marched down the said valley of Amarioka Pana, and we, returning the same day to the river's side, saw by the way many rocks like unto gold ore, and on the left hand a round mountain, which consisted of mineral stone. The king of Spain is not so impoverished by taking 3 or 4 towns in America. Then I began to sound the old man as touching Guyana. He told me they called themselves Orinoqueponi. Pony means in Makusa language upon, and that on the other side of the Emiria Mountains there was a large plain, which I after discovered on my return, called the Valley of Amarioca Pana. To Francis Sparrow I gave instructions, if it were possible, to go on to the great city of Manoa. I was informed of one of the caciques, chiefs, of the valley of Amarioca Pana, which had buried with him a little before our arrival a chair of gold most curiously wrought. The territory of Ojeda was to the east of the Gulf, to be known as New Andalusia, after a Spanish province, while Nequesa had the western side, which for the first time appeared under the name of Golden Castles on the coast of Americas or America, and the fertile island of Jamaica was to be the joint granary. Threatening punishment on those who had been trading in his province, they refused to join him and moved to Panama, from which the ships were afterward destined to sail, carrying the conquerors of Cox Amarca and its millions, the road which led to the conquest of America and 20 millions. Taking pity on them, pointed out a little restaurant by a light in the woods. Taking pity on them, pointed out a little restaurant by a light in the woods, which they followed promptly, almost entering an American village. During the voyage, an apparition bewildered them until it was found to be a native American ship. After coasting along the Pacific, they returned here, where some of the Spaniards, falling in love with the ladies, the agreeable manners of the people, and the comfort and cleanliness of the place, begged to be allowed to remain, which was granted, while some of the Americans, Peruvians, joined the ships to learn Spanish. During the year that Pizarro had returned to found cities and to mine in the mountains called Golden Castles on the coast of Amaracapana, their people landing in the Orinoco, as Sir Walter Raleigh had done, settled at Amaracapana, from which place the German Fetterman led an expedition to Bogota in search of its treasures in 1534, while another marched across the Andes. Beyond us lay another town toward the south in the valley of Amarioca Pana. Proceeding onwards, Pizarro learned Proceeding onwards, Pizarro heard from a government officer that the sovereign, who had a large army with him, was at Port Amarica on the other side of the mountains. Continuing their march, another envoy met them with more royal presents, and a week later they were in the valley of Casa Amarica, where the woolen dresses, neatness, cleanliness, and superiority of the people and their residences very much surprised them, as they gazed in wonder from the mountainside at miles of streets and roads forming the city of Casa Amarica. The government warehouses of the city of Casa Amarica were so full of cotton and woolen goods, beautifully dyed in various colors and of exceedingly fine texture, that the immense quantity taken by the Spaniards did not make any perceptible difference. As the population on the Atlantic side of the Andes Mountains are also Quichua or Amarican, let us now recall some of the history of the great Chicha kingdom of Cundinamarca. After the Peruvians and Mexicans, the Chibchas, improperly called Muisca, meaning man, were the next in importance of the 5 great nations of America. Their kingdom of Cundinamarca and its capital of Bogota now forms part of the United States of Colombia in Central America, containing 100,000 square miles of territory. The kings of Amarica on the Pacific coast had a road which followed the course of the Andes Mountains, connecting their city with the capital of Cundinamarca. The author explains the rites and ceremonies of the Muiscas under paganism and informs us that when anyone died from the bite of a snake, that the sign of the cross was placed on the tomb, which is the American Peruvian sign for the word Amaru, and with the addition of the word Ka, or land, represents the sacred national name, America. The Andes silver mines of Peru and Cundinamarca are yet the richest in existence, and the finest gems of these mountains are the emeralds found in the Tunja mines near Bogota, which supply nearly the entire market of the world. The chief kingdom in the Western Hemisphere when Columbus landed was Amarica, or America, whose Inca kings claimed descent from the Aymara race of Aymarica, the earliest known of the existing population, from whom these monarchs, who resemble them, got some of their arts and religious ceremonies. The national history of Amarica names Saint Amarica, or America, the capital, as the first city of the empire. The ruins of the old city, once the large and opulent capital of Utlatlan, with the court of the ancient kings, was the most sumptuous that had been discovered in that section of America. The Americans, the American or American national history. These celebrated Americans or Americans, improperly called Peruvians, had a sacred book which explains clearly the origin of their illustrious national name. Casa Amarica was the royal sacred necropolis, and near it is Pult Amarica, where the sulfur springs are still called the King's Baths. Jan Amarica was their Hercules from Jan, behold, the present indicative of the verb Jan Hall, to be. Behold America was an appropriate name for the American Hercules. There was Vin America, in the Gulf where Manco Capac, the prince of American legislatures and first Inca king, received his divine vocation. Then there were the cities of Ang America, Chinpi America, Uria America, Cat America, Cal America, and Pa Tenamit America, or America the Capital, the only one which appears in their ancient documents and sacred history as the foundation of their kingdom. Casa America is now a department in northern Peru, with a population of 280,000 people, though only 14,000 square miles, a very small part of its ancient area. It is between 6 degrees and 8 degrees north latitude, 78 degrees longitude, one of the most fertile parts of South America, where many of the descendants of the American nobility still reside. It was some time, however, before the country became known under the name of America, and Bishop Giraldini, writing from the New Lands in 1515, said clearly in a letter addressed to Pope Leon X that the island was larger than Europe and Asia, which the ignorant call Asia, and others America or Pariah. The kings of America had a curious system of naming their cities and provinces. The sacred city we called the capital of America, and others America in the mountains or the valley, and similar designations, but it was written Amarca by the Spaniards, in whose language the word Marca means a frontier, and from this they gave it an easy form. When the Moors were masters of Spain, a large number of words were adopted from their language, and the pronunciation hardening materially become at the time very guttural, which was learned from their conquerors, in whose Shemitic tongue there are no vowels. In the first standard map of the world showing the Western Hemisphere, it was called an island, and there also appeared another named Tamaracqua, meaning America or America, which was not an island, but part of the mainland, much resembling one, as may be observed by our sketch. One cause of the various ways in which the ancient name of America was written is that the natives who had no alphabet wrote pictures of their ideas, as all the early nations did, becoming the origin of our alphabet, which is only an abbreviated form of the original pictures. When the Native American wrote the sacred word Amaru, he drew a cross, and so did the Aymaras for their name, and this with the sign for Ka or land was America. It is a curious fact that the American writing was much more reliable than ours, as they understood a written word by its sound and also by the picture of its meaning. Let us see results. The English word glory was originally crew. Its first change was to clue, being more easily pronounced, and then for the same reason to glue, and later to glor, which became Latinized as Gloria and Englished as glory. How difficult and uncertain this looks. And why did crew mean glory? But let us take a pictorial word. In Mexican, a doctor is a man with the head of a plant. Here, no change is possible, for take away either the man or his vegetable head, and the doctor disappears. The Americans could not understand why a word was written by letters which were not pictures of its meaning. And when the Mexicans were taught the Lord's Prayer in Latin, they repeated it for some time with much devotion, and eventually began to write it, beginning with the first words, Pater Noster, each very unfortunate for them, as they have not any sound in their language to represent our letter R, which appeared in each of these first words of the prayer. The most illustrious national name of America was therefore sacred to her people, written in their pictorial writing by a snake crossing a straight line and called Amaru, the great sun, which began to mean anything sacred at a later period. And when an American went nearer to any of the temples than the law permitted, the police said, Amarak, stop, don't do that. For these were the temples of their king, who was also the spiritual chief, and this was the name. Who said that America was called after Amerigo Vespucci? Amerigo Vespucci was a Florentine residing at Seville, Spain. As the agent of the celebrated commercial firm of Buonanotte Berardi of Italy, during the period when Columbus discovered the Western Hemisphere, and being anxious to see it, he was permitted to go with Ojeda, who sailed on the 20th May 1499. As we have seen, Amatacapana, the only place where Ojeda was favorably received during the voyage that Amerigo Vespucci was with him and treated like an angel, became the first settlement of the Spaniards and was the name of that coast. In April, he became a naturalized Spanish subject and received authority for Berardi to dispatch ships to the West Indies. His letters are said to have been sent to the Duke of Lorraine, who apparently saw in the name of Americana or America the evidence of the new continent's discovery by Amerigo Vespucci and the Duke's secretary. In 1508, Vespucci became a senior Spanish pilot, and 3 years later, the government prohibited the sale of maps to foreigners. Las Casas, who wrote a history in 1527, informs us that he was said to have written the name of America on the map, which, as we have seen, was perfectly correct. It was Spain, therefore, who adopted the native name of her new coast of Americana or America, and Charles V gave it to his new world, while outsiders from whom all information had been prohibited are the only people to whom historians can refer in justification of their assertion that Vespucci named America. A historian of the Middle Ages who did not make mistakes was a most unfashionable being, which none of them can be accused of. And as soon as they had decided that Amerigo Vespucci must have named America or America, in consequence of the similarity of name, and that this was positive evidence of its discovery by him, they began to correct what they supposed to be errors of their contemporaries. The first, which seemed to be a serious blunder, for it gave to Columbus the honor of the discovery of the Western Hemisphere, and concluding that two voyages of Vespucci had been made into one, they divided them, giving to one the date of 1499 and to the other 1497, being a year before Columbus. But it was not so to the compatriots of Vespucci, who wrote book after book, but it was not so to the compatriots of Vespucci, who wrote book after book on the nautical deeds of our Amerigo, as they called him. And over the gate of a college in Florence, which one of his ancestors had endowed in the 13th century, there is an inscription stating that Amerigo Vespucci, the discoverer of America, had once lived there. If the early writers on this subject had only inquired whether Vespucci had named America, they would have been saved the trouble of proving that he did not discover it. Viscount Santarem had over 100,000 documents examined in the royal archives of Portugal relating to voyages of discovery, 1495 through 1503, none of which mention his name. It is not for us to unravel the medieval attempts to explain the cause, which never existed, of Vespucci's having named this continent. He died in 1512. The Spaniards continued their conquest, and finding that America was the national name of the southern continent, the government adopted it. It is extraordinary that it could have been believed so long that a senior pilot, a foreigner, in the employment of a government who prohibited outsiders from sailing to the New World, or even obtaining maps of it would have been permitted to give his name to America, remaining in employment of Spain and on friendly terms with Columbus. And when we know that the only evidence that the Western Hemisphere was named after him is the withdrawn suggestion of a pamphlet of 4 pages, it is still more remarkable, specifically when we consider that ideas of that age were so often printed without the slightest reason, like the work of Goropius Bacanus, who attempted to prove that the 3 first languages used in the Garden of Eden by Eve, Satan, and God were Persian, French, and Swedish. So, America or America was the first known name of this hemisphere to her Spanish discoverers, and the only one among those of the 4 quarters of the globe of which the history and origin has been preserved so far as it is known at present. One of the greatest successes of medieval days was its geographical errors, but the Amerigo Vespucci fable was a highly respectable myth in comparison to others. Etymology Online, again, Etymology Online, consider that this is the online version of the etymology of words. Truth, Old English trude, West Saxon trude, Mercian, faith, faithfulness, fidelity, loyalty, veracity, quality of being true, pledge, covenant, from Germanic abstract noun, truitho, from Proto-Germanic truas, having or characterized by good faith, from pi, druo, a suffixed form of the root deru, be firm, solid, steadfast, with Germanic abstract noun suffix etho. Sense of something that is true is first recorded mid-14th century, meaning accuracy, correctness, is from 1560s. English and most other IE languages do not have a primary verb for speak the truth, as a contrast to lie. Truth Squad in U.S. political sense first attested in the 1952 U.S. presidential election campaign. Truth, trist. It is the hypothetical source of evidence for its existence is provided by Sanskrit, Dru, tree, wood, daru, wood, log, timber, Greek, dris, oak, drymos, copse, thicket, doru, beam, shaft, or spear, Old Church Slavonic, drevu, tree, wood, Serbian, drivo, tree, derva, wood, Russian, drevo, tree, wood, Czech, derva, Polish, derwa, wood, Lithuanian, drutas, firm, derva, pine, wood, Welsh, drude, Old Irish, dran, strong, Welsh, der, true, Old Irish, derb, sure, Old Irish, dour, Welsh, Derwin, oak, Albanian, drusk, oak, Old English, trail, treau, tree, treu, faithful, trustworthy, honest. Th, suffix forming nouns of action, state, or quality, from verbs or adjectives such as depth, strength, truth, from Old English, bu, o, from Proto-Germanic, abstract noun suffix from pi, Sanskrit tati, Greek tet, Latin tati, as in libertatum, liberty, from liber, free. That's truth. Reality. Etymology. Etym Online, the online version of the etymology of words. Reality, 1540s, quality of being real, objective reality, from French reality, and directly from medieval Latin realitatum, nominative realitas, from late Latin realis. Also compare realty, which was the older form of the word in the sense of reality, mid 15th century, meaning real existence. What is real? The aggregate of all that is real is from 1640s. That of the real state of something is from 1680s. Sometimes 17th century, 18th century. It also meant sincerity. Reality-based is attested from 1960. In marriage counseling, reality television is attested from 1991. Real, early 14th century. Real, adjective, early 14th century. Actually existing, having physical existence, not imaginary. Mid 15th century, relating to things, especially property. From Old French real, actual. From late Latin realis, actual. In medieval Latin, belonging to the thing itself. From Latin res, property, goods, matter, thing, affair, which Devane traces to a PIE, here, wealth, goods, source also of Sanskrit, reum, rea, property, goods, avestin, rei, wealth. This is from the Black America's Handbook for Survival through the 21st. The Black America's Handbook for Survival through the 21st century. The Forgotten Truth Behind Racism in America. The Secret Heritage of America. Author Radine A. America. And this is a scan of a physical copy of this book that I own. Reality is everything that is in union with nature. Illusion is anything that creates separation from nature. Do the right thing.